We moved to Connecticut the summer before I entered 6th grade, in 2001, into a beautiful new house in one of the most beautiful towns. It was a bit more rural than we were used to in New Jersey, but we adjusted. My sister is 2 years younger than me, so she was going into 4th grade at the time. We came from a neighborhood where we were all super close and everyone knew each other. Kids running back and forth to each other's houses. We were sad to leave it. Within the first few weeks, we met some of our neighbors. Everyone was what we soon defined as very Connecticut. It was all a bit surface, and nobody had that New Jersey warmth that we had been used to. In particular, our neighbors directly across the street seemed a bit odd. The mom would come over to vent to my mom about her sons and husband, or ex-husband, we could not figure it out at the time. And my mom, being a sweetheart, was welcoming and warm. The holidays came around, and the neighbor boy across the street was in my sister's 4th grade class. My sister came back slightly alarmed by what had happened in class that day. The students were asked to make a Thanksgiving turkey out of a traced drawing of their hands. On each finger, they were to write things they were thankful for. The neighbor wrote things like being a loser, hating myself, etc. Very dark things for a 4th grader. Fast forward to Christmas, and my mom heard that they had nowhere to go for the holidays, so she politely invited the mother and 2 sons to our annual Christmas Eve party. The boys were so strange. They listened to Japanese techno with headphones on and spoke to no one. They headed straight to our basement to play video games. It was weird. The younger one was always much stranger than the older one. The neighbor mom would always open up to my mom and aunt, who works with special needs students, about how he would hurt himself and how he needed to be put in special needs programs, but he could never quite be diagnosed. They thought he was on the spectrum at first, but that quickly proved not to be the case. We always assumed she was confiding in them because my aunt was experienced with special needs kids and she was looking for advice. Those Christmas Eves stand out to me because they were in our home, in a very intimate setting, but we saw them on a daily basis. My sister and I would come home from school telling my mom about how weird the younger neighbor boy was, and that something was off. I will never forget her telling us, "Just be nice to him, you do not know what he is capable of." That struck me as so odd at the time, but we listened. I do not know if his mother told my mom something that scared her and made her say it, or if she just had a gut instinct. Shortly after that, and I cannot quite remember if this was middle school or high school, I think I was in 9th grade and my sister and the younger neighbor boy were in 7th, so we all rode the bus together. What my mom said stuck out in my mind, so one day, I decided to be friendlier than usual. There was snow on the ground, and the younger neighbor boy was drawing something in it and muttering to himself, "Kukumi I luku." No idea how that should be spelled, but that is what he was saying on repeat and drawing in the snow. It stuck with me. I decided to greet him. "Hi, Adam. Good morning." No eye contact. "I will bomb you," he said, making no eye contact. We let it slide. We came home and told my mom, and she reiterated, "Just be nice. We do not know what he is capable of." Keep in mind, we were kids. We did not know what to take seriously and what not to. I wish we had done more. He was not someone who was bullied or made fun of. He was always off in the sense that he could not hold eye contact or a conversation, or even say hello. Kids did not make fun of him. He was a loner, but it seemed to be by choice. I did not know why we were cautious or afraid around him other than the fact that he showed zero warmth, zero humanity. We knew he had special needs, so we never really second-guessed anything and just tried to be as polite as possible. When the bus would drop us all off at our respective houses, he would run all the way up his driveway on the hill with his hands by his sides and then turn around and make a hiss noise at everyone, making claws with his hands. It was always so odd, but again, we were kids, and there are always a couple of kids in school who are a little strange. We took it as just that. They were invited to several Christmas Eves, so my memories kind of blend here. One year, the neighbor mom started screaming at my innocent grandmother for being a Yankees fan. She was a Red Sox fan. It was beyond strange because my grandma is the cutest little lady of all time and was in no way trying to argue over sports. It was as though the woman clearly had a weird switch go off. She was always nice to me, but I will be honest, we rolled our eyes every time my mom invited them. It was always such forced conversations with her, and as a teenager, I wanted nothing to do with being cornered into another chat. I think she must have just been lonely. The following year, and the final year they were invited to Christmas Eve, was when she got into it with my mom about having guns in the house. The boys only attended the first couple of Christmas Eves, so it was just the mom this time around. The topic of guns came up. The neighbor mom started telling my mom about how she has guns in the house and how she takes her younger boy to the shooting range all the time. My mom said that she did not agree with having guns in the house. She was not trying to argue, but the neighbor mom got out of hand about it. She became very defensive and ultimately got aggressive, explaining how she grew up in New Hampshire, and that is just the way of life there. The neighbor mom told us how brilliant the younger neighbor boy was, and that he had hacked into some of the government's highest levels of security, and that the CIA showed up on his doorstep. We have absolutely no idea if this story is true or not, but this is what she told us, so it became our ongoing joke whenever anything strange happened at our house. There were a few odd things throughout the years. Our internet had clearly been messed with. Lights would flicker in the house, and we would joke that it was the young neighbor boy each time. It was not until December 14th, 2012, that we knew just what he was capable of. I was out of college, working outside of Philadelphia. My sister was still a student in college, and my youngest brother a student at the high school. It was the worst day of all of our lives. My dad heard the gunshots in the morning that killed the neighbor mom, Nancy Lanza. He assumed it had been a hunter in the area, maybe a little closer than usual, until the FBI showed up and he had to evacuate the house as snipers lined our driveway. My mom was at the mall, and we were all frantically calling one another as the news broke slowly throughout the day. At first, they had his identity wrong and said it was his brother, but we knew it had to have been him. Thank God for my mom making sure we were as nice as possible. Although I do not know that it would have stopped him. I wish we had done more at the time. I wish we knew to do more at the time. We did not. We did not want to assume the worst about someone. I wish we had. 20 students, 6 teachers, killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School that day. The worst act of evil I have ever experienced so directly in my life, and I hope I will never experience anything like it again. One day, when I was in elementary school, I think it was probably 3rd or 4th grade, I was woken up by my mom in a rush. She had overslept, and since she always woke me up in the morning, this meant I had overslept too. There was no way I would be ready for school in time to catch the school bus. I think school started at 8 a.m., and my bus pickup time was at 7 a.m., but it was already around 6:40, and I was still in my pajamas and hadn't had breakfast yet. So my mom decided that we would tell the bus driver to go ahead without me, and she would take me to school, which would give me time to get ready. I'm sitting at the dining room table eating breakfast, still in my pajamas, and it's now about 6:50. We hear the bus pull up, about 10 minutes earlier than usual. My mom peeks her head out of the door into the foggy morning and waves the bus on. She closes the door and comes back inside, but the bus doesn't leave. There's a knock at the door, and my mom opens it to find a man in a bus driver uniform. He explains that he's a substitute driver because the regular driver called in sick. He says he knows he's a few minutes early because he wanted to get an early start on the route since he wasn't familiar with it. My mom explains to him that she was going to take me to school since we woke up late. He gets visibly upset and says he can wait a few minutes since he's ahead of schedule. My mom insists that I won't be ready in a few minutes and tells him to go ahead. He seems angry, but he turns around, gets back in the bus, and leaves. I return to eating my breakfast, and I still haven't put on my school clothes at this point. But at 7 a.m. sharp, another bus pulls up to my house. My mom thinks this is strange and goes outside to talk to the driver. She comes back inside looking terrified but doesn't say anything about it, and tells me to finish getting ready for school. At the time, I didn't know what had happened, but my mom told me a few years later. When she went to the second bus, she found that it was driven by my regular bus driver, and it was full of the kids who were usually on the route. My mom asked the driver about the substitute driver and about him calling in sick. "I never called in sick. There is no substitute driver on my route," he said. The driver immediately called dispatch in a panic and told my mom to go inside and call the police, which she did without me knowing, to report the incident. There was no one else doing the driver's route that day. Whoever that man was, he was most likely a kidnapper who had targeted me. I never heard anything about it again, not even if anyone else had been picked up by this mysterious fake bus driver. But chances are, if I had gotten on that bus, I would have never made it to school or back home, and if my mom hadn't overslept that day, I would have been on that bus. My mom was always very cautious about the bad things that could happen to her children. She would take all three of us, my brother, sister, and me, to school in the morning as she worked close to the time school started. I had been begging to bike to school since I got a new bike for my birthday a few months earlier, and she finally agreed. I was in grade 7, so 12 or 13 years old, and I'm female. My school was a 2 to 3 minute drive and about a 10 to 15 minute bike ride. I was eager to ride my new bike to school, as I had also gotten a new helmet and bike lock to go with it. School started at around 8:30 or 9, so I left around 8. I liked to hang out in the yard with my friends before school started, so I would always leave earlier. The route to school was mostly a straight line down one main road in my city. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, so it was relatively bright outside, and again, I was on a well-populated main road at a time when everyone was heading to work or school. About halfway to school, I decided to cross the street, but not at a crosswalk or traffic light, just kind of jaywalking, or biking if you will. As I stopped in someone's driveway, looking both ways to cross, I noticed a black car pull up to my left and park on the side of the road. It was a 2-door Honda Civic type car from what I can remember. I'm 21 years old now, and all the windows were tinted. I didn't think much of it. The only thing that crossed my mind was that I might be blocking them from getting into their driveway, so I continued trying to cross the street. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man dressed in all black, with his hood pulled up to hide his face, get out of the driver's side and walk around the back of the car to the passenger side. Before I had a chance to realize what was happening, he opened the passenger side door and began pulling me by the arm off my bike, attempting to put me into his car. For what felt like forever, it was as if every car on the street had disappeared. Any sign of help was completely gone. One of the busiest streets in my city felt like a gravel road in the middle of nowhere, with nothing in sight for miles. It also felt like one of those awful nightmares where you try to scream but nothing comes out, so you're just silently suffering until you finally wake up. But it was real. I couldn't scream. I can only describe the feeling as being trapped in a nightmare without the ability to wake up. Things like this didn't happen in my city, so I wasn't prepared for what to do in a situation like this. I did the first thing that came to mind. I aimed for his groin. I shifted my weight to my right leg and kicked as hard as I possibly could with my left. I landed a kick which actually hurt my ankle a bit, so I can only imagine how it felt on the receiving end. He instantly let go. I didn't even look before I crossed the street, biking as fast as I could. I tried to turn around to get the license plate number, but my eyes were too watery from the tears, and it still felt impossible to make any noise. I knew my mom would be at work by now, so I just continued biking to school, silently crying the entire way. I pulled into the schoolyard and dropped my bike. I didn't care to lock it or even ride it again, frankly. My school's front door was locked 24/7, and you had to ring a doorbell to get in, so I did exactly that. The secretary reminded me that I still had time to play outside before class started. That's when I was finally able to speak again. "I need to call my mom," I screamed. The door opened instantly. I explained what happened to the secretary, then the principal, my mom, and finally the police, who I refused to talk to until I had spoken with my mom. The police arrived at the school shortly after and took my statement, and later, I went to the station to make another statement with my mom. A business across the street from where it happened had video surveillance, but it only captured the bottom 6 inches of the guy's car pulling up, his footsteps around the back of the car, and then the car pulling away shortly after. Basically, there were no solid leads on who this creep was. The same man, matching both the body and car descriptions, went on to attempt to kidnap 3 other girls, but he was never caught.